The Sacramento Kings need a point guard, so I am here to help them find who that point guard should be. I have devised a super scientific method. Okay, there's no opinions here. It's only science. We are going to definitively, objectively find who the Kings' next point guard should be. After last season, the consensus kind of was that the Kings need a point guard. After they traded De'Aaron Fox, didn't really have a point guard on the roster. Malik Monk was the closest that they had to it, so they tried running him at the point for a little bit. Didn't work great. Then they turned to DeMar DeRozan. Went okay, but that's not really something that you want to be doing going into next season, right? You don't want DeMar DeRozan to be running your point for the foreseeable future. That's not something that's really sustainable. And so we need to find the Kings a starting point guard for next season. Now, I'm not sure I feel like that's the Kings' biggest need. I feel like size and athleticism defensively up front is still probably a bigger need than a point guard, but a point guard is definitely still a big need. So that is what we are here to find today. I've assembled a list of 8 possible candidates. Now, there are plenty more candidates that the Kings could go after to fill that point guard spot, but I just have 8 guys. Some of them guys that I just really like. Some of them that are just very realistic options. Some of them have a lot of star power. Some of them are probably better off the bench. But the Kings need somebody to run the point. So I've assembled 8 players. And of these 8 players, I am going to go through each one. And there are 4 categories that I'm going to rate them on. Again, a super scientific method here. The first category is the fit. So with fit, I'm considering their point guardiness. Are they that playmaker that the Kings really need? Because we saw how things went when the Kings point guard wasn't very point guardy. And, when I say point guardy, the most point guards are like Tyrese Halliburton and Chris Paul. And then on the other end, maybe you have like a Malik Monk, who's not that true point guard. So I feel like the Kings need that really playmaking point guard to set up a Zach LaVine, to set up a Domantas Sabonis, make life easier for others within the Kings offense. You also have to consider things like, are they a good shooter? Defensively, do they have size? Can they contribute to that defensive identity that Scott Perry and the Kings want to have going into next season? The next category is the cost to obtain them. So that's either how much it's going to take in a trade to get them or how much it's going to take to sign them in free agency. That one's pretty straightforward. Then you have the risk, taking things like their contract into account, their injury history, their age, their potential, things like that. And then the last category is the vibes. And so that is really just how excited I would be if the Kings were able to get that player. What direction will they push the Kings towards? Will they be fun to watch next season? Because the Kings don't want to go into a rebuild, but the Kings probably also aren't going to be contending for a championship with this core or anytime soon. And so it's just how fun are they to watch? Because I just want to be able to go into next season and have fun watching this team and be excited to watch this team. So that's what that category is about. So each of these categories, I will rate them on a scale of 1 through 5. And then in the end, we will add up all of those scores. And that will tell us who the Kings should target to be their next point guard this offseason. And just real quick, before we really get into this, I was joking about this being a scientific, objective equation, but this way of rating players, it isn't really perfect. So don't take the final scores too seriously. I just wanted a fun way to talk about the potential candidates for the Kings. So I have 8 names. We will go through each one of them. They're in no particular order, but the star level players are towards the front of this list. And then as we go on, we get towards more of the role players of the list. So starting out, we have Trae Young. Trae Young has been on Atlanta for a very long time, has had some success with them, some playoff success, but also it's possible now that they decide to move in a different direction with some of their young guys. So it's possible they could look to move him. And so starting with the fit category, I'm going with a 4 out of 5. If you want a point guard, Trae Young's a pretty good one. I mean, you just look at these assist numbers. He's one of the best passers in the entire NBA. Maybe even the best passer in the NBA. His assist numbers have gone up every single season. Last season, averaging 11.6 assists per game. If you want somebody that's going to set other guys up, that's going to have the ball in his hands and set other guys up, this is your guy. He can obviously shoot the three as well, so that's great. And he can be your 1A option offensively. And that's something that the Kings need, because right now it feels like the Kings have a bunch of third or maybe second options offensively. And so they do kind of need that 1A option. So if you really want that, I mean, Trae Young's your guy. The reason why he doesn't get a 5 out of 5 in the fit category, I mean, the defense is a big concern. And so, I mean, the question would be, in a trade for Trae Young, who are you giving up? If you are pairing Trae Young, Zach LaVine, and Domantas Sabonis all together, the defense is going to be a massive concern, especially if you're pairing Trae Young with Domantas Sabonis. The other team is going to attack them in the pick and roll every single time down. That would be a massive concern. Also, Trae Young, most of his career has been paired with lob threats. Sabonis is not a lob threat, although I'm sure that pick and roll would still be lethal between them offensively. But the reason I still have him as a 4 out of 5 fit, I don't think it really matters if he's going to be your 1A option. Everybody else then becomes expendable, and so you're kind of just building around Trae Young at that point. And so even if the fit isn't perfect immediately, I don't think we really care that much. Now, the second category, the cost, 5 out of 5. I mean, the Hawks, while they could look to move off him, it's not like they have to by any means, and he's still such a great player. And so they're going to need a lot in return if they want to trade Trae Young. It would take a lot of the Kings' assets, I'm sure. You know, he's young. He's at 26 years old. He'll be 27 going into this next season. The Hawks could possibly be looking to move on to the next stage of their franchise with, you know, Jalen Johnson and Zachary Ricochet and whoever they draft with the 13th overall pick. That was the Kings. But it would take a whole lot to get him. The risk, I don't see there being too much risk at 2 out of 5. He has one more season and then he has a player option. So really the risk is, does he just walk in free agency? Because in terms of injury history, it's not too bad. As you can see, you know, 76 games, 73 games, 54 games, 76 games in the past 4 seasons. That's solid. You're not locked into a contract, so that could be seen as a good thing, but it's probably more of a bad thing, because you would have to convince him to stick around when you probably gave up a lot of assets to give him. But the real risk comes in the cost of what you give up for him. And so that's a different category. So the risk isn't too high there. And then the final category, the vibes, absolute 5 out of 5. He's a super fun player to watch, a player that the fans would easily be able to get behind, someone that you can build the team around for the future. And I feel like the upside of the team would go way up. And so if you could somehow make a deal like this happen, then all of a sudden it feels like you've been saved, because you finally have, or not finally, because you have a 1A option back on the team that's young enough and that you can build around for the future. The next guy on this list is someone who I feel like is kind of similar to Trae Young in a lot of ways, and that is LaMelo Ball, a guy that the Hornets could look to move off of, because the Hornets are just, I mean, they're in a really rough spot. They just haven't been able to get any lottery luck and haven't had a lot of luck in trying to build up this team. And so they signed LaMelo Ball to a big extension. But as you can see, he hasn't played a lot of games, 47 games last season, 22 the season before, 36 the season before. There are questions about him as, is he a winning player, which I don't always love that type of discourse, because it's like, look who he's been surrounded with. He hasn't been given a good team. He hasn't had a chance to prove himself at all. But I do somewhat get where people are coming from. It's like how he plays on the defensive end, some of the shot selection and efficiency on the offensive end. So I get where people are coming from with that. In terms of the fit, I would give him a 3 out of 5. I feel like he's pretty similar to Trae Young in a lot of ways. He has more size defensively, which is always a plus. Does he really use it that much? No. So the defense would still be pretty bad, but he's still a guy that can act as a 1A option, even if he isn't that same type of first option as Trae Young. A solid playmaker, but a guy who at times can be a little frustrating to watch with how he plays on the offensive end. Last season, his true shooting percentage was 53.6%. Not great. He shot 40% from the field, 34% from 3, but he would still be that point guard that the Kings need. The cost, I would say, is a 4 out of 5. Would not take nearly as much to get him as a Trae Young. but he still is a young all-star level player who's under contract for 4 more years. But the Hornets might want to get off of that deal. But it's still, it's not someone that the Kings can go out and get for cheap in free agency or something. Still a young player that I feel like the Hornets could still build around, so it's not necessarily a guarantee they want to move off him. So you'd have to give up something for him. You would have to make the money match. There would be a ton of risk with the injury history. He just doesn't play games. He's locked into a big deal for 4 more years. Again, there's questions about, is he a winning player? And really that just means, can he play enough defense? And does his offensive game translate to the playoffs? And so you would be pairing him with, Domantas Sabonis, possibly, unless, he's involved in the trade, who then has those, exact same questions. So a lot of risk. But the vibes, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. Not quite the same level as Trae Young, but still a young, high-profile player that would come in, and he's a very fun player. Again, questions about whether he's a winning player, but a very fun player. Super talented, and if he gets his ankles right, could be the future of a team. Next up, you got Jrue Holiday. Jrue Holiday is a player that the Celtics are probably going to look to move off of, especially now with the Jason Tatum injury, because their salary cap situation is not good and Jrue Holiday is owed a lot of money. So Jrue Holiday, I have his fit at a 3 out of 5 defensively. Is the perfect fit. In terms of identity, is the perfect fit. Gives the Kings that dog that they really need. But then the questions come on the offensive end. I mean, since he left Milwaukee, in Milwaukee, 19.3 points per game, 7.4 assists per game in the 22-23 season. And then you come into Boston, and obviously that drop slot, he's not asked to do as much, but he's getting older, and my question would just be, is he really that point guard that's going to be able to play make and get others involved? He did that early in his career, but it's like, is he still that same player? The 3-point shot is super hit or miss. So offensively at this point in his career, the fit would be a big question, but defensively he still is a perfect fit. In terms of cost, I have it as a 3 out of 5 because that contract is not good at his age. And so the Celtics want to get off of it, but there still would be some cost because you have to trade for him. You have to make the contracts work. It'd probably be, in a multi-team deal. And so maybe you could somehow get some assets to come in alongside of Jrue Holiday by taking in his contract. And then that would, change that cost number. But I feel like a 3 out of 5 makes sense there. In terms of risk, I have it as a 5 out of 5 because he is, what is he, 34 years old, and he's locked into a big contract at that age. And that contract, there's just a ton of risk. But the vibes I have as a 4 out of 5 because, yes, you're not getting like the star player for the future, but I just love Jrue Holiday. So it's as simple as that. I love Jrue Holiday because of what he can do on the defensive end. I think he's one of the clutchest defenders in the league, although he may not have shown that this season in the playoffs, but, his track record before that, he definitely was. And so he's just a guy that I kind of want to see on the Kings, even if it doesn't make the most sense. And then we move on to the fourth guy, and this is the last of the star players. We have Ja Morant. Ja Morant over these last few seasons he's had his problems off the court and on the court. So he just hasn't played all that much, and so are the Grizzlies kind of just done with that whole experience? Maybe. I have Ja Morant as a 4 out of 5 fit, and I'll be straight up, there's not a single player that's going to be a 5 out of 5 fit. Because you have to be able to defend with size. You have to be able to play make. You have to be able to shoot. There's really no point guard available that can do all of that. So he's a 4 out of 5 fit because he doesn't have that size defensively. He doesn't shoot from deep all that well, but he still would be the 1A option offensively. A playmaking guard would definitely fill that De'Aaron Fox void. The cost would be a 5 out of 5. I don't think there needs to be much explanation there. Despite his struggles in this past couple of seasons, he's still a young, extremely good player. The risk, I actually only have it as a 2 out of 5, and I could see people disagreeing with that, but I think he's past the off-court troubles. I don't know. I mean, maybe he's not, but I feel like these past 2 seasons, he's gotten past some of the off-court troubles. On-court injury risk is still somewhat high for him just because of the way he plays. But I feel like next season he's just bound for a bounce back. And I feel like if you're going out and getting Ja Morant, he's going to be the type of guard that can be the future of a team. And so for that reason, the vibes are 5 out of 5. Again, you're getting that point guard for the future and getting a guy that can be the centerpiece of your team for the future. Now we move on to the much cheaper options. So we can start with Tyus Jones. He's going to be a free agent. I have his fit as a 4 out of 5 because he's not a defensive player. But when I'm really looking at a fit for a point guard, defense is kind of the last of the concerns, just because I think the Kings need to improve defensively elsewhere. And it's more important to have that playmaking and offensive type of point guard for this team. And that's exactly what Tyus Jones can do. A playmaking point guard. His assist numbers are good. Last season, 5.3 assists, 1.1 turnovers. Shot it efficiently from 3 at 41.4%. He's going to be cheap because he's a free agent, so I have the cost at a 1 out of 5. The risk is low at a 1 out of 5. He's a guy who's been available. You're probably not going to lock yourself in long term or anything. But then the vibes are a 2 out of 5 because you're not getting that point guard for the future. You're just getting a nice player to fill in. Then we have another free agent point guard, and that is Jerome. Jerome had a ridiculous season last season with Cleveland. Had a true shooting percentage of 64.3%, 12.5 points per game, 3.4 assists, coming off the bench mostly. But he wasn't very good in the playoffs. And the Cavaliers have a lot of decisions to make when it comes to where they're at in terms of salary. So Jerome could be a guy that goes elsewhere. In terms of fit, I have him as a 3 out of 5. He's not going to be the defensive guy. The question also is he, a starter? Can he be a starting level point guard? He's probably more of a scorer than a playmaker. In terms of cost, a little more expensive than Tyus Jones at a 2 out of 5. He's a free agent, so it's not like you're really going to have to trade anything for him, but he's still going to be more expensive contract-wise, probably. The risk is a 3 out of 5, again, because he's a free agent and he's not going to be super expensive. You're not going to have to give up a lot for him, but there is still risk because the sample size of him being this good of an NBA player it's very small, and you would have to give him a somewhat sizable contract. And the vibes would be a 3 out of 5 because, he's a very good player, a very good scorer, a very fun player. But he's not the star point guard for the future by any means. The next guy is Malcolm Brogdon. He's another free agent point guard coming off 2 seasons where he just didn't play all that much, and he definitely is an injury-prone player. He's getting up there in age, but I think the fit's a 4 out of 5 because he's a bigger point guard. He's a playmaking point guard. Last season when he played, 12.7 points per game, 4.1 assists. He's not going to be expensive, 1 out of 5 cost. The risk is probably a 2 out of 5 just because he's so inexpensive. So there really isn't risk, and he probably isn't going to command a long-term contract, but there is a lot of injury risk. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. And then the vibes I have as a 1 out of 5. Just because, it's Malcolm Brogdon. It's like, it wouldn't be that exciting of a signing. It would just be kind of a filler signing. But he's a very solid player. And then the last guy, I have another Jones brother, the younger Jones brother, and that is Tre Jones. He was very good for the Bulls after he got traded there from the Spurs. The Bulls just have a lot of guards there, so they're going to have to pick really who they want, and they have, Josh Giddey, Kobe White, some other guys as well, and so I could see Tre Jones as a free agent kind of slipping through the cracks there. I have his fit as a 4 out of 5, really similar to Tyus Jones in terms of a playmaking point guard, not the defensive guy. With the Bulls, you can see they're 50% from 3, not a very big sample size. I really wouldn't be looking for too much scoring from him, really just the playmaking. It's not going to cost a whole bunch, 1 out of 5 in cost. 2 out of 5 risk, just because he's not the proven player that Tyus Jones is. And then the vibes would be, again, a 2 out of 5, just because he's not going to be your point guard, your starting, star point guard for the future and a franchise player or anywhere near that. But he's a solid playmaking point guard to put in there. That's going to be the cheap option. That's going to be the low risk option. And I feel like that's kind of what the Kings need. And so now it's time to total up the scores. And to be clear, when I'm totaling up the scores, when a guy has a 5 out of 5 risk, I'm not giving him 5 points for that. I'm flipping it to make that be 1 point. But it just made sense. Like 5 out of 5 risk seems like a lot of risk. But for risk, for cost, those numbers get flipped when I'm adding them to the score, and then the vibes and the fit numbers get added to the score. And that's how we come to the total scores. I put each player into one of 4 tiers, and I made beautiful, beautiful graphics that took me ages to make that I'm sure you'll love, and I'm sure you're bound to write beautiful things about in the comments. You might be able to tell graphic design is my passion. And so we can start out with the don't do it tier. So that is Jrue Holiday and LaMelo Ball. LaMelo Ball coming in at 10 points, Jrue Holiday coming in at 11 points. And so these guys are just very high risk guys that also come with a cost in trading for them, that are locked into big deals long term, that scare me a lot. And so that is why they go in the don't do it tier. The next tier is the Ty Jerome tier, and you might be able to guess who's in that tier. Yes, it is Ty Jerome. And so Ty Jerome is not as high of a risk as those other guys, but still not the best player for the Kings, just because he's unproven and he's more of a scorer and more of almost like a Malik Monk type of player, which is not really what we need. But he's lower risk, so he kind of goes up a tier from that bottom tier. The next tier, we have the solid options tier, which has Malcolm Brogdon, Ja Morant, and Trae Young, all coming in with a nice 14 total points. Oh, and I think I forgot to say, but it has it on the graphic. Ty Jerome, 13 total points. So these guys came in with scores of 14 for different reasons. Ja Morant and Trae Young, very similar reasons in that these are going to be your like star players for the future. If you're going after a point guard to have a star player, but that's going to come at a extremely high cost, but that's also very exciting and would be very fun. Malcolm Brogdon is in the solid option tier because of how cheap he is, because he's a proven point guard. Yes, the injury risk is there, but in terms of the contract, there's not a lot of risk. And then the final tier, and if you're keen, you might be able to figure out why it is named what it is named. It is the Jones brother tier, including Tre Jones and Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones coming in the lead with 16 points, Tre Jones right behind him with 15 points. And so the reason these guys really made it to the top of the list is because they are playmaking guards. They're going to be the playmakers and then get out of the way of your other offensive players. They're not going to give you too much defensively, but they also aren't going to come at a very high cost. These are not guys that are going to command a whole bunch of money. Tyus Jones comes out on top because he's the more proven player, the much better shooter, the scorer. Tre Jones is still right there because he's younger, possibly has more potential. And so the Jones brothers come out on top. Another reason we should go after a Jones is to keep the tradition with the Kings of having a bunch of Joneses going, right? We traded Colby Jones. I don't know if Mason Jones is going to be back on a 2-way contract. So we have to get more Joneses to go along with Isaac Jones. I feel like Isaac Jones, I mean, he'll be scared not having another Jones on the team. That would be frightening. So like I said, I mean, these aren't even my opinions, right? This is not who I want. This is scientifically what the numbers say. Objectively, this is how good of an option each player is. Scott Perry and his staff better be watching, better have a good grasp of this scientific equation I have. But really, I think what you can take from these tiers is that I do value the kind of steady, low-risk options at the top. And then the second tier, you have a couple of big swings that are very proven players in Ja Morant and Trae Young. Malcolm Brogdon's kind of just in there. Ty Jerome's kind of just in there. And then you have the Jrue Holiday and LaMelo Balls, who are very high risk and maybe not having the highest upside, or in LaMelo Ball's case, just being so high risk. So that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. Let me know what point guards you want the Kings to go after. You know, these equations I made, by no means perfect, so I just thought it would be a fun thing to do. So let me know who you guys want, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.